They found us long before we ever found them. For them, we were just another primitive species orbiting a minor star. Our signals had reached their listening posts. Our languages were deciphered, our history analyzed. They watched our wars, our famines, our protests, and our slow crawl into low Earth orbit. They judged us, and they laughed. Their report was clinical. Species Beta 112. Bipedal primates. Tool-using. Emotionally unstable. Technologically chaotic. No central leadership. No significant energy manipulation. No faster-than-light capability. Conclusion: contain threat. Recommend passive observation. No intervention required. They watched our television broadcasts with amusement. They monitored our political divisions and called them self-inflicted fractures. They saw our progress and dismissed it as inefficient. They concluded that we would burn ourselves out long before we ever pose a danger to anyone beyond our own biosphere. A senior assessor in the Galactic Concord wrote, "The species exhibits determination without direction. They strive, but without foresight. Their weapons are advanced compared to their social maturity, a volatile blend. Still, their self-destruction is statistically inevitable. No further concern needed." So they labeled us weak, unfit, irrelevant, and they moved on. The Concord scouting beacons, placed in the Kuiper Belt, relayed our broadcast to central processing arrays. Alien scholars used Earth as a case study on failure. Galactic youth laughed at our clunky rockets and solar panels. Our attempt to land on the moon were archived in preliminary interplanetary curiosities. Earth was background noise in a galaxy that had long since stopped being surprised by newcomers. But one observer wasn't so certain. A junior analyst from the Zelnari Institute filed a dissenting note. She noticed a pattern. Species Beta 112 demonstrates accelerated adaptation cycles. Failure rates are offset by iterative learning. Each generation incorporates the errors of the last. Recommend continued analysis. Her colleague scoffed. They lose more often than they win. She replied, "Yes, but they learn faster than they lose." No one listened. In the meantime, we launched more satellites, built space stations, sent rovers to distant planets. Not because it was profitable, not because it was safe, but because we had to. For us, struggle wasn't the exception. It was a rule. Survival demanded ambition. But the Concord interpreted our chaos as incompetence. They argue over climate, over borders, over gods. Their nations compete instead of cooperating. They're fractured. They'll never leave their solar system. And for a while, it looked like they were right. We stumbled. We failed missions. We lost crews. We saw rockets explode on the launch pad and still came back with new designs. Our colonies were small, fragile, and constantly underfunded, but they existed, and they grew. A probe launched from Earth in 2076 reached Jupiter in 2082. It transmitted back images of a volcanic moon, Io, erupting into the void. The aliens watching labeled it an observational milestone. We labeled it a target. They saw us as reckless, but they didn't see the resilience behind that recklessness. They saw conflict, but not the unity that emerged after every war. They saw division, but not the share will that arose when survival was at stake. We didn't expand because it was glorious. We expanded because Earth was growing too tight to contain the weight of 8 billion aspirations. In 2091, humanity launched the first manned mission to the Martian surface. The journey was slow, the landing imperfect, and the return grueling, but it succeeded. One of the engineers left a message etched into the lander's hull. "This isn't the end. This is the proof we can begin." The Concorde didn't care. "They're still too limited," one report said. "They burn chemical fuels. Their bodies aren't adapted for low gravity. Their lifespans are short. They are bound to that one star." And again, they miss what mattered. Because even bound to one star, we never stopped moving. In 2103, we built orbital rings to support interplanetary launches. By 2112, we had constructed fusion reactors on the moon. Not perfect ones. Not clean, but functioning. They called our technology crude. We called it progress. When we deployed robotic miners to the asteroid belt, they said, interesting but unsustainable. When we returned with enough raw material to double our orbital industry, they called it temporary luck. We never asked what they thought. We didn't know they were watching, but we would have done it anyway, because while they waited for guarantees, we moved with risk. While they studied, we built. While they debated, we sacrificed. And in 2127, we launched something new, a ship unlike the ones before it. Not massive, not sleek, not fast by galactic standards, but it carried something no alien race expected. It carried purpose. Unlike the Concorde's cruisers, optimized for control, this vessel was built for survival under extreme conditions. It ran on a hybrid of human-designed fusion and gravitational slingshot systems. It was ugly, but it worked. And when it crossed Neptune's orbit on its own power, the alien observers issued a minor alert. The analyst who had once been dismissed was contacted again. Your species of interest has deployed a deep-range exploration vessel. Thoughts? She replied. You were wrong. Still, the consensus held. They're mobile now, but limited, containable. They didn't understand what had changed. We weren't just reaching further. We were accelerating. And for the first time, humanity began to think not in decades, but in centuries. Not in flags and borders, but in orbits and atmospheres. Not in wars, but in survival beyond Earth skies. The Concorde shrugged. The galaxy had seen this story before. They said, another ambitious species, climbing just far enough to fall harder. They gave us a designation. Observe and forget. They thought we were slow. They thought we were weak. They thought we didn't matter. But what they missed, what they never could understand, was that we were just getting started. It didn't happen with a bang. There was no alien invasion, no great unifying threat. The change came quietly, the way all permanent things do, through necessity. Earth broke, and humanity was forced to decide whether it would break with it. In 2141, the oceans surged beyond containment. Coastal cities vanished under the tides. Crops failed. Power grids collapsed. Economies dissolved. The Concorde watched with smug satisfaction. As predicted, they noted self-termination through environmental mismanagement. The cycle completes. But the cycle didn't complete. It cracked and we crawled through. There were riots. Millions died. Governments fell. But something unfamiliar happened next. Instead of turning on each other, survivors turned toward each other. Nations formed coalitions not for conquest, but for preservation. The United Planetary Front was born, not to lead humanity, but to prevent it from dying. Alien observers flagged it as an anomaly. Unified behavior across fractured cultures under pressure? Highly unusual, possibly temporary. They didn't understand that humans had never needed peace to unite. All we needed was a reason. That reason came with Mars. The Martian colonies had barely survived the crisis. Supply chains from Earth had gone dark. Life support systems were failing. But instead of abandonment, Earth did something irrational. It diverted resources from its own recovery to launch emergency aid missions across 54 million kilometers of vacuum. No profit, no gain, just resolve. One alien scholar remarked, Species Beta 112 exhibits behavior consistent with hive loyalty, despite lack of genetic uniformity. Another corrected him. No, this isn't biology. It's choice. Within a decade, the Martian colonies had become self-sustaining. Lunar habitats expanded. Orbital industry resumed. The population loss on Earth was catastrophic, but in that loss, we found clarity. There was no backup planet, no miracle salvation. The stars weren't a curiosity anymore. They were an obligation. By 2156, the United Planetary Front coordinated a full-scale expansion initiative, not conquest, not exploration, colonization, engineered with brutal pragmatism. Europa, Ganymede, Titan. Radiation shielding was crude. Life expectancy was low. But we did it anyway. Alien assessments began to shift. Resource expenditure far exceeds survivability index. Motivation unclear. They didn't see the pattern. When Earth broke, we built Mars. When Mars faltered, we built the belt. When the belt ran dry, we went to the outer moons. Every loss created momentum. Every failure, a foundation. We failed forward. The Concorde sent probes to monitor us more closely. Their reports became less dismissive. They continue to expand. Efficiency remains substandard, but resilience is extreme. Technological growth no longer follows predictable models. Contingency planning recommended. But still, they watch from a distance. They saw fusion facilities ignite on Titan, powered by methane oceans and iron will. They saw floating cities in the Venusian atmosphere, using electromagnetic suspension to resist the crush of gravity. They saw deep core mining stations on Ceres, extracting frozen volatiles by hand when automation failed. And they kept asking the wrong question. How are they doing this? They never asked why. We weren't chasing utopia. We weren't trying to catch up. We were trying not to vanish. Earth's lesson had been clear. The universe owed us nothing. Safety was a myth. Survival was earned. And so we earned it. In 2172, a breakthrough changed everything. Human researchers cracked a method to stabilize fusion in small-scale reactors using a technique no alien race had ever tried. One that relied not on exotic particles or wormholes, but on quantum field turbulence caused by controlled collapse geometries. It worked not because it was elegant, but because it was ours. Alien physicists were stunned. One commented, "This level of innovation from a species that only recently overcame internal combustion is alarming." Another replied, "It's not innovation, it's desperation perfected." With scalable fusion, we no longer needed Earth's dwindling resources. Power became mobile. Settlements multiplied. Distance no longer mattered. Harsh environments weren't obstacles. They were test beds. By 2180, over 500 million humans lived off Earth. We were no longer a planet-bound species. Alien councils reconvened. Risk levels were reevaluated. A formal report was filed to the Concorde Central Council. Species Beta 112 is no longer in planetary infancy. Expansionist behavior observed. Cultural conditioning appears to favor confrontation with adversity. Recommend elevation to caution tier red. But it was too late. The wave had already begun. From the sun's corona to Pluto's orbit, humanity wove itself into the solar system. Orbital shipyards constructed vessels not for exploration, but for survival and eventual deterrence. Civilian craft were equipped with hardened hulls and redundant systems designed to outlive their crews. We didn't fear the void anymore. We turned into home. The stars still felt distant, but we understood now they wouldn't come to us. And we didn't need to reach them all at once. One star system, one sphere, one future. That was enough to build a civilization worthy of the term. The Concorde, still watching, issued one final assessment for internal use. They are no longer collapsing. They are coalescing. They called us weak. But strength, we had learned, wasn't loud. It wasn't dominance or elegance or tradition. It was persistence. It was a refusal to stop, the refusal to fold, the refusal to let the past define the future. In our ruins, we built. In our failures, we climbed. And as the solar system lit up with the glow of human industry, we became something no alien race had planned for. We became permanent. They had no choice but to acknowledge us. By 2193, the Concorde dispatched a formal diplomatic probe, uncrewed, of course. It arrived near Saturn's orbit, beaming greetings in 32 galactic dialects, a test to measure our response capability. The message, buried in pleasantries, was clear. We see you now. Prove you deserve to be seen. We didn't respond with awe or reverence. We responded with a signal of our own, encoded in tight beam transmission, using mathematics as the shared language. It began with prime numbers, then atomic weights, then fusion output ratios, then orbital schematics of our inner system, and finally, an invitation. You are welcome to observe, but not to interfere. That last line was deliberate. They had called us weak. That assumption had protected them from us. But now, we had evidence that someone had been watching, monitoring, judging. We weren't naive anymore. The silence of the stars wasn't emptiness. It was containment. So we drew a line. The Concorde didn't reply. Instead, they escalated observation. Probes doubled, then tripled. Unidentified drones were spotted near the asteroid colonies. One of them breached a refinery near Vesta. It didn't attack. It just scanned. But we weren't interested in being studied like animals. Within minutes, the drone was disabled by a railgun defense turret. It wasn't a war, but it was a warning. And they heard it. From their perspective, we had advanced too fast. Civilization timelines across the galaxy stretched into tens of thousands of years. Most species matured slowly. They stabilized before expanding. They conformed to Concorde protocols. Humanity had done none of that. We tore through our own limitations with raw stubbornness and a tolerance for pain. We were unpredictable, non-compliant, dangerous. By 2201, the Concorde declared Earth's system a potential volatility zone. That label meant only one thing: preparations for containment. We weren't surprised, but we weren't unprepared either. The solar defense net had been under construction for years. Initially meant for asteroid deflection and solar flare shielding, it evolved quickly into something more strategic. A layered grid of satellites, drones, and autonomous interdiction platforms surrounded the planetary orbits. Each unit was modular, each network node decentralized. The message was simple: you may come, but you will not come unnoticed, and you will not come unchallenged. Still, the Concorde underestimated us again. They sent a stealth ship, a reconnaissance vessel cloaked in magnetic distortion fields, hoping to slip past our defenses. It reached orbit around Europa before we responded, but respond we did. It was caught, tracked, and boxed in by a swarm of mining drones repurposed for aggression. They didn't destroy it. They dismantled it, methodically, piece by piece, until its core was exposed. Inside, they found something unexpected: a crew of biological hybrids, part organic, part machine, used by the Concorde for high-risk missions. They weren't armed. They weren't hostile, but they were proof that the Concorde didn't trust us. And in response, we delivered our own proof. We broadcast the disassembly footage across deep space channels. We know, we're watching too. The reaction was instant. Some Concorde factions argue for direct engagement. Contain the humans now, while they are still localized. Others hesitated. They've grown within hardship. Any aggressive action could ignite exponential resistance. What they didn't know was that we had already faced our apocalypse. Earth's near collapse had burned weakness out of us. Fear didn't move us anymore. The worst had already happened. All we knew now was how to endure. And we were still climbing. In 2207, the first generation of human-born AI command minds reached deployment, not centralized superintelligence. Humans had learned that lesson the hard way. Instead, they were distributed, cooperative intelligences built to adapt, not dominate. They governed our orbital traffic, managed our life support systems, ran simulations of stellar migrations, and more importantly, they coordinated our response protocols. If the Concorde attacked, we wouldn't just react. We would survive, because humanity's strength wasn't just its technology or its numbers. It was our refusal to be erased. Every ship we built, every colony we planted, every defense turret we activated, it wasn't to expand, it was to stay. We didn't need the galaxy's approval. We needed our own future. But something unexpected happened. One Concorde vessel, a diplomatic courier-class ship, approached slowly, lights activated, defensive systems off. It broadcast one word in a language we hadn't taught them, but they had learned anyway: respect. They docked with our relay station, orbiting Mars. The crew never disembarked. There was no exchange of goods or culture, just a file transfer, an archive of other civilizations, thousands of species, timelines, warnings. Among them, a message stood out. This galaxy is ancient, but not wise. It consumes the brave and silences the reckless. Your species is both. Proceed accordingly. And so we did. By 2215, humans had created the first Solar Expanse Treaty, a declaration signed by every colony, every habitat. every off-world nation. It didn't promise peace. It didn't forbid conflict. It promised one thing only: the stars will not belong to those who wait. They will belong to those who act. The Concorde didn't reply, but they didn't send more scouts either. We had gone from curiosity to anomaly to threat, and finally to peer. Not because we matched their elegance, not because we copied their protocols, but because we refused to stay where we were born. They had called us weak, but now they watched us build, watched us endure, watched us claim every orbit, every moon, every challenge, without invitation, without permission, and without apology. And in their silence, we understood we weren't alone anymore, but we were finally undeniable. They didn't warn us when the first real threat appeared. Not the Concorde, not their watchers, not their couriers. It came in silence, an object the size of a moon, entering our system from the edge of the Oort cloud. No emissions, no propulsion signature, just momentum and mass. It absorbed every signal we sent, didn't answer, didn't slow. Our sensors struggled to classify it. It wasn't a weapon, or at least not one we understood, but it was old, far older than anything in Concorde records. We didn't panic. We prepared. For the first time in a century, Earth, Mars, Titan, Europa, even scattered colonies on Pluto, acted in perfect synchronization. Ships were redirected, power grids rerouted, weapon platforms brought online. Every child of Earth understood something primal. Nothing enters our sky without being known. We didn't have a name for it, but we gave it one anyway: the silence engine. As it neared the Kuiper belt, it began to fracture space around it. Not a shield, an erasure. Physics bent, time stretched. Probes sent inside simply stopped existing. No explosion, no signal loss, just absence. One of our AI command minds ran a simulation. The outcome was clear. If it reached the inner system, we would not survive. The Concorde didn't help. They didn't even contact us. Perhaps they thought it poetic, that the species they had once deemed unworthy would now be tested by something they themselves had avoided for eons. But that was their mistake. We weren't them. They waited on history. We made it. The solar defense net was reprogrammed in under 16 hours. Orbital habitats were evacuated in strategic zones. Civilian fleets were repurposed into kinetic delivery platforms. Every functioning engine in the system was pointed toward the object, not to stop it, but to understand it. And when understanding failed, to fight it. We knew it might be suicide. We launched anyway. Thousands of unmanned craft collided with the silence engine, breaking apart in clouds of plasma and data. Each impact sent back readings: field harmonics, gravity spikes, microsecond survivability windows. That was all we needed. Humanity didn't fight with elegance. We fought with information. The Concorde watched as we fed machines into mob entropy, not to win, but to learn how to win. Every loss was a lesson. Every failure became strategy. In 32 hours, we had a working model of the enemy's distortion field. In 38, we had the beginnings of a countermeasure. And at hour 42, we hit back, not with exotic weapons, not with dark matter bursts or antimatter spears, with mass. Jupiter's largest mining station fired a payload of solid tungsten wrapped in a gravitic resonance shell, a brute force impactor moving at a measurable fraction of light speed. No guidance, no finesse, just momentum, multiplied by human desperation. It struck the silence engine dead center. The object cracked, not visibly, not completely, but something in it faltered. Its trajectory veered. Its gravitational shadow blinked. And in that blink, we struck again. The second wave wasn't metal. It was code. Every AI, every node, every shard of quantum logic we had launched a coordinated signal into the fracture, not to destroy it, to overwhelm it. We didn't break it. We confused it. That was a secret. It wasn't a weapon. It was a machine built to operate in a static universe. Predictable, silent, but we weren't silent. We were noise incarnate. We were unpredictable, illogical, loud. It couldn't process what we were, and so it fled. The silence engine changed course, burn a hole in local space, and vanish beyond heliopause. It didn't leave a threat, didn't send a warning. It simply retreated. The Concorde sent a message 2 days later. Text only. No voice. No pretense. Contact reclassified. Human civilization granted conditional sovereignty. Treaty rights pending. Observation continues. We didn't reply, because by then, we had already started building something else. A new station, far beyond Neptune. A staging point. A beacon. We'd learned the lesson. The universe wasn't hostile. It was indifferent, but now it had noticed us. And that meant it would never leave us alone again. So we wouldn't wait for the next thing to come to us. We would go to it. Our ships changed. They grew teeth. Hulls designed for colonization were retrofitted for endurance, for pressure, for battle. New drive were tested. New minds were born in the databanks of Saturn's moons. AI constructs that remembered the silence engine not as threat, but as challenge. Children of Earth had become children of Soul, and Soul no longer needed protection. It was the warning. In the years that followed, our influence reached past the system's edge. Trading posts, listening stations, black site labs experimenting on faster-than-light concepts the Concorde had long dismissed as myth. Everywhere we went, we left a mark, not just of presence, of intention. We weren't expanding because we wanted more space. We were expanding because we refused to shrink. That was the truth the Concorde never understood. They thought power was measured by control, by longevity, by heritage. We knew better. Power was a will to build when everything said you should collapse. Power was the drive to learn from pain. Power was being called weak and never believing it. So when the next race emerged from darkness, struggling, crawling, burning through their first mistakes, it wasn't a Concorde that extended a hand. It was us. And we didn't offer them rules or judgment or silence. We offered them a choice. Follow the path we cleared, or clear your own, but never stop walking. That's what it means to be human. Not perfection. Persistence. We were born in gravity wells, in chaos, in blood and breath and fire. We were told we would never last. And yet we endured. They called us weak. And we conquered the solar system. Not because it was easy, because it was ours.